We're going to bring in Robert Champion to be able to essentially educate our audiences in both of those spaces, the cannabis space and the more general business space, about what his company does. And it's called InnoFlex Solutions. And one of the topics he wanted to touch on today, I put my glasses on so I can read it correctly, how manufacturing companies can transition and sustain automation. Right, Robert?
Good afternoon, Mike.
How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be on again today. Good to be here.
I always like to start off with, and I probably did a very cursory introduction. You could do it much better, but I always assume that some of our readers out there, readers, listeners, whatever, don't know anything about it. They may have heard the name or maybe not even heard the name. So go ahead and give us a little backgrounder here, if it would.
Yeah, quick marketing intro. InnoFlex Solutions is a consulting and engineering firm that grew out of the food and beverage industry over 30 years, working with OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, and also the food companies that manufactured the product and sold it to consumers. So we are a holistic organization that looks at the big footprint, especially in automation today, as we start to find ways to have things or products on shelf when we want it, not have them stalled because of logistic reasons and for innovation and renovation. So we work with all size companies, and we started to look into the other industries that are similar to the food and beverage industry to see what commonalities that both sides would have relative to technology and automation, where it makes sense.
All right, so we got some different categories on my notes here. Transition to automation, and you have 3 points that you want to make. Why don't you go ahead and make those points?
Yeah, so Mike, it's really, I think, as we look at traditional automation over the last 10 years, and then recently, I say the last 3 years, as we looked at getting into COVID, out of COVID, but even before COVID, what do food and beverage companies, that particular industry and CPGs, what do they do well? What do they want to do better? And how is it similar to other industries like maybe automotive? So if we talk about just, transitioning to automation from a manual standpoint of doing things with manual labor, why would you use automation? What are the levers for you to engage with automation? And I think you start with looking at your 1 to 3 year plan, your whole organization, from top down with marketing and sales aspirations on. If we take food and beverage on volume, growth on those volume on particular brands, trying to sustain growth, create new growth, take over some market share. How do you do it, and can you do it quickly? So you start with, really what's the aspiration of the organization. So you start with non-engineering and non-technical levers, and you kind of drive it through your organization, looking into operations and manufacturing to say, wow, what's our opportunities? Where are the gaps? And what does it cost? So you start, pulling in information and data from all parties, from all functions in your organization to make that decision. Because it's a decision that you live with either short-term or long-term. Most of the time it's long-term, and you don't want to have long-term headaches that you could have solved from a short-term, better due diligence from short-term. The second point is, once you look at the 1 to 3 year, I'm going to call it the master plan. You want to look at what your opportunities are in that master plan to invest in. And right now we're talking about CapEx, capital investments. So when we talk about transitioning to automation, typically that's not always, but CapEx investments. So you look at certain main drivers of your organization. What's going to drive you to invest that money? And some of those buckets could be your own internal KPIs, key performance indicators. It could be compliance, things that are regulatory that you need to meet and to be in business. It could be safety, as an example. It could be flexibility, meaning you want to be able to pivot quickly in market, to get new products on shelf, to do it at a lower cost, and then untapped capacity and efficiency. So how do you unlock what you have, or either bring in automation to gain that threshold to go forward? So those are kind of some of the 3 buckets. And the third bucket is, once you've decided on what you want to do and how you want to do it, is what levels of automation do you need? That's a tough question, because if you can only imagine, do you need full scale, lights out factory with all automation, with only one person running the control room to start it up and shut it down? Or do you need incremental levels? And, the flip side, go full automation is a big elephant to try to swallow, right? So most companies start off with levels of automation, and then you have to decide what's the right automation for you to, as we move into the next phase later on here in this conversation, how do you sustain it?
Yeah, why don't we dig into that? How do you sustain it?
Wow, that's a big piece. So sustainability, I think we now move into operational excellence. So CapEx is more of what you want to do and why you want to do it. And operational excellence is how do you execute that. And I think you start off with controls and standards and procedures. You start off with the basic stuff. What do you do? What's documented? How do you do it? What do you do? How do you do it? And then how do you measure against that? And you will find that most companies that want to move into automation, if they're fully manual today, or a big percentage of their business is manual, they really don't document how their processes to really duplicate it from shift to shift, from day to day. It's sort of documented, but not really. It's not connected. So automation is going to require you to connect some of the dots that you do today, probably haphazardly, but not in a controlled environment. So you want to document down your standards and your procedures through your organization. Everything from, what technology to use, your PM plans, what level of feedback would you want from a system to maintain it? For instance, AI comes into play, in digital, what levels of digital do you need, right? So sustainability using the tools of digital and AI allows you to get feedback, real-time feedback, and to do something with the data immediately. So real-time feedback. So standards and procedures. And then I'm going to say the third one is validating something that's really big that no one talks about is I'm going to call it your modes of operation. You would say, okay, what's modes of operation? So if you've documented your standards, say it's in your product, your material, your people, capability standards, the line that you're putting in, the way it's sequenced to run, the other big piece that's missing is modes of operation. This is really, how does the end user, in this case, it's called a CPG company, how do they engage with that line, that production line? So there are routines that they do that are a cadence that they get involved with the line, either quality checks, online, offline quality checks, samplings of various types. And what happens is the line is meant to run consistently, or if it's running, say, in a asynchronous motion type or batch mode, that it has a routine. When you disrupt a line by engaging with it, by stopping it or doing something else to it to stop that routine, you allow potential variability to take place into that line. And when variability happens, you don't have continuity on efficiency, and your cost of goods, your TCO is fluctuating. You don't have a consistent baseline in your costs. So modes of operation essentially says, how does the customer engage with the line? What are the routines? And document that in the design of the line in the OpEx stage. And when you're moving from manual to automation. So sustaining it means you look at modes of operation and you track modes of operation with some of the digital and feedback that you have as far as tools, and also the other features you can get back from AI, which is condition of devices on the equipment or the system, thermodynamics, speed, things of that nature. You can get things back real time, which help you. And the other way to ensure sustainability is as you launch innovation and renovation of your brands on the line, you want to make sure you understand variability. What oftentimes happens is this new widget or gadget is liked by marketing and sales. They like to have it yesterday. And you get involved with and pulling it into your manufacturing and operations, but the variability around that product is probably not baseline. The equipment has variability. Your people have variability on skill level and training. Your materials that you bring on the line have variability. This goes back into standards when we talk about moving from manual to automation. When you have variability on inputs into a system, you're inherently not going to have a system that's sustainable. what you'll have is inefficiencies where your system goes up and down and you don't realize the potential of that line because of the variability in your inputs. So modes of operations really look at the variability and tolerances of each one of these inputs and tries to constrain them, track it, and build the system around that. So when you talk about automation, when you talk about putting robots on the line to replace people, it still comes into play. What are the variabilities that robotic system has to deal with? And oftentimes your suppliers in the hiring, say food and beverage company, has good intentions to look and find that, but because of the pace and the aggression and the time scale to get things done, oftentimes it's missed, and you find that out when you go into production. And that's really the story of it. So, I mean, in a nutshell, sustainability, if you look at the four main inputs that required for a production line, you want to get control over those.
All right. And I know from your background, you work with some fairly well-known companies. Can you talk a little bit about who some of your clients are?
Well, yeah. So today we're working with InnoFlex Solutions. We're working with consumer package companies that are not food companies, but they're in the packaging space. Companies that are leading premier companies that do card manufacturing, business cards, that moving from manual to fully automation, no automation when it comes to packaging in the primary and secondary and tertiary packaging. So really walking through that with them to understand, again, their landscape. What's their 1 to 3 year plan on volume? What's the volume forecast, and what's the right equipment to match it? So companies like that. And also, we've looked at fringe businesses around sort of the cannabis industry to help them with packaging, to understand it. You know, how can we translate what's done in food and beverage to the cannabis industry, because they use the same materials, they use some of the same equipment for the most part. But again, how do they translate that, moving from a lot of the manual operations into some levels of automation? So we work with companies in that space, and some small beverage companies, some startups that want to get involved with some launching of some products that are native, just virgin products that they've created, and how to scale that up relative to packaging and, filling in packaging. So we, in the last 2.5 years, we've been engaged and still pursue to do that across, the landscape. And we've also, we come out of the food and beverage industry, we've worked with OEMs in that space, and also some very large food and beverage companies that, have asked us for some assistance.
And I know one of the things, at least particularly in the cannabis space, that they're looking for is more eco-friendly packaging. When you go to a dispensary and you purchase a product, there's like 3 layers of plastic you have to go through to get to the product. And a lot of them are looking for, hemp-based stuff or something along those nature that's biodegradable. Are you seeing that pretty much across the board from a lot of folks?
Yeah, it's not just cannabis industry. It's also your traditional food and beverage industries and mature industries. Yes, it's to be a good steward of the earth and all the ecosystems, and there are edicts on a lot of the web pages that these companies have about being, carbon free, or reducing the carbon footprint through all the areas of the operation. So not just the materials and hemp base, but also, in addition to that, looking at lines that perform well, where they don't use up a lot of energy to run, right? So solar power and things of that nature. But to really answer your question about materials, yes, we're getting a lot of requests on, reducing material footprint. A lot of it is driven from Amazon and the e-commerce space too. If you're playing in that space, is fitting the right pack size and reducing materials and frustration-free packaging. So yes, the key to that, Mike, is compatibility to the equipment and automation. So, where our company comes into play is we become a lighthouse for the end user or the seller of the CapEx equipment, and also the manufacturer of the product. We're in the middle looking at the whole landscape, because both sides don't have time to look at, how to harmonize material with the equipment. Again, you're producing day to day. How are you going to stop, pump your brakes? And also, even with your R&D centers, really engage with the leaders in the space of material science to bring that into the mix. So yes.
All right. Sounds great, Robert Champion from InnoFlex. So if folks want to reach out to you, find out more information, work with you,
Yeah.
how do they do that?
Well, you can reach us several ways. Our office number here is 248-994-2223, extension 3134. You can reach us on the web, look at our website, see what we do at www.innoflexsolutions.com. You can get a hold of me on my mobile at 248-214-8480, or you can email me direct at robert.champion@innoflexsolutions.com.
All right. Well, thanks very much for being on the show today, Robert.
I appreciate it, Mike. Thank
All
you.
right.